Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom, a podcast that allows experts to share their stories and secrets to unlocking their financial independence. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator in Ambler, Pennsylvania that is focused on educating investors with different ways to grow their retirement savings faster through alternative investments. And of course, we are continuing to record our podcast remotely. And a happy new year to all of our listeners. I'm Jess Jones, CamaPlan team member and podcast host. We're super excited to have our first guest of 2021 with us today. As the founding member of Adams Investor Group, LLC, he has actively acquired and managed a formidable portfolio of high-performing real estate assets. Before becoming a real estate investor and creating his own firm, he served top-tier firms and consulted high-net-worth clients with a focus on maximizing tax-favorable positions as a CPA specializing in real estate taxation and forensic accounting. His accounting experience in combination with a passion for real estate investing led him to create Adams Investor Group, in which he is focused on helping clients understand their tax and cash positions when it comes to real estate investments. Now, with over 20 years of investing experience, he continues to further his education on accounting, tax, and real estate so as to best serve his clients and analyze investments. And he has currently sold 3,800 apartment units valued at over $210 million. So without further ado, please welcome our first guest of 2021, Brian Adams, to The Road to Financial Freedom. Brian, thanks so much for being here today.
Well, Jess, thanks so much for having me. What a pleasure to be working or on this podcast with Cama. I've had great success with Cama myself personally, and as you teed up that intro, thank you for that. I've always referred my clients, investors, I should say, to Cama. So what a great company you guys work for.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've only heard great things from everyone here at Cama about you, Brian. And you, in our discussions, you have not disappointed in any way. So we're so happy to have you on board, especially as the first guest of the new year. I know for me, one of my New Year's resolutions is to, I've been sitting here listening to however many great folks like yourself come in and talk with me on this podcast. But I really want this year to focus on setting myself up financially for my own financial future and really feel good about where I stand with that. I opened my 401k last year at the very end, and I have a ton of, not a ton of money, but I have a ton of little index fund investments here and there just to get my feet wet with things. But it's something that I'm still kind of in the dark about. So I think with your background as a CPA and someone who focuses a lot on making sure that, there are tax favorable positions in your investments is going to be really interesting, even from my own personal standpoint. And I think our listeners will gain a lot from it.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of share, Jess, some of this information. I started in real estate, I would say that at a young age. I remember as a boy, my grandfather would take me around with him to his rental properties. So I would cut the grass for my grandfather, and then he would give me like $5, and I was like over the moon. Like $5 back is many years ago. I was like, yeah, it's great. But then he would also take me to go collect rent from his residence, and for some reason, as a young kid, that connection piece of seeing the exchange of money, and then he would give me the $5. I just kind of connected all those little dots. Then for some reason, just kind of stuck with me. So just a little bit about my background, and then we kind of get into some high level topics, I guess. But so when I was in high school, my football coach. Because I played high school football, and my football coach was my accounting teacher. And although I wasn't the best student in class, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Brian, you got a real knack for this accounting. I was pretty good at numbers." And he's like, you may want to consider being an accountant, right? So that was my junior year in high school. And for some reason, Jess, that just kind of stuck with me. I'm going to be an accountant, right? Like some of my buddies, they want to be doctors, attorneys and movie stars. But, I made the decision early on in high school that I wanted to be an accountant. So I graduated high school and I played college football at a Division III school in the Wilkes-Barre area. And I focused on getting my accounting degree in college. And then I graduated college, and I immediately went to working for some CPA firms. some of the top firms in the world. And it's so interesting as I reflect back, working with these high level clients that their net worth ranges from, maybe a couple $100,000 to over $100 million. And I was fortunate enough back then to really understand why some of these clients, were being successful. And not everyone is successful, and I guess we should define a little bit about, okay, what is success? And I'm really speaking with, they're from a financial perspective, those that have been successful, in my opinion, just looking at numbers, are those that can leverage their time to produce passive cash flow, so that you don't need to work. In my opinion, you don't need to work 90 plus hours a week, in the job, if you will. As long as you can certainly do that if you have that passion. But if you can make your money or have your money work harder than you do, you can then stop trading that time and really, accelerate growth and wealth.
That's awesome, Brian. I think you bring up a great point that, I've heard in the past too, is the fact that time economy, when it comes to these types of investments and setting yourself up to make your money work for you, is something that a lot of investors should not take for granted. The fact that, how much of your time are you investing currently in your job, and how much of your time do you want to be investing in order to make your money work harder for you? So I think that that's a great point. I'm also interested always in when our guests say that they have a background in something like sports or arts or something like that. So did you ever find that as a football player who was also studying accounting at the time too, were there any interesting discoveries or overlaps or things that stuck with you from your discipline in football that now pop up even still as a CPA or as Adam's investor group's head?
Yeah, I think just kind of reflecting, because anything that we want to put our mind to or want to accomplish, it's never easy, right?
Right.
Playing sports at any level, it can be challenging. So as I was able to kind of, work hard and I think education, regardless of whatever that education might be, is such a critical fact. You want to educate on the football field, or we want to educate ourselves on, how to grow our portfolio, or how do we, like, just tying back the stop trading your time for money approach, how do we tie in educating ourselves? How can we make our money work harder? So that, I think that principle, back many, many years ago, has stuck with me, is that we always need to be educating ourselves and never stop learning, right? We always want to kind of be moving forward. And it's interesting also is, some of the clients that I worked with over the years, they've always told me that if they could trade one thing, they wouldn't have worked as hard, because our families and, being available to our families is so important, because, back in the day, as a CPA, I was working really hard for someone else, working 80 to 90 hours a week during tax time. And just one year I stopped and I counted the minutes. I was able to see my girls and wife about, 10 to 15 minutes a day, leaving super early in the morning, getting home late, working weekends. I'm out there cranking these tax returns. This was an awakening for me. I had a sick feeling in my stomach, the thought of spending so much time working and missing out on my girls growing up. What if they think I'm a terrible parent, right? Do they even know who their dad is? He's working so hard. So I guess what I discovered through this, what I call now my incredible journey, is what I had to discover was I had to figure out a way to quit my CPA job at, again, some of these top firms in the world. I had to figure out a way to quit my job, and at the same time, I needed to, make money to support my family. So it was no easy journey. I've bought and sold, as you shared, 3,800 apartment units over the years. And by no way has this been an easy journey, but so exciting, because I've able to tap my experience of, again, working with these high net worth clients, in my formation of my early formation as being a CPA, I got to see wealth creation because I was helping them. These clients would call me and say, "Hey, Brian, we're working on such transaction, real estate or whatever." And so I'm giving them tax minimization strategies so that they can enjoy, them personally. So then fast forward a little bit now, now I can kind of formulate that back to my investor group because of my, my background being a CPA and with forensic accounting experience. So it's been such an exciting journey. And, as we now approach 2021, the start of the year here, there's, some challenges ahead. But I think with coming back to what I was saying earlier about, education and discipline, we can make our money work harder for us. I do believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you put it into great terms too, the way that you describe everything. I hear CPA and I immediately think of spreadsheets upon spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of numbers that are just way above my head. So I think you really contextualize it in a way that it sounds like your clients can also kind of palate too, Brian. So you described the moment of, wow, this is my realization moment on my discovery, my journey, the fact that I'm not spending as much time with my family as I would like to be. I'm working 90 plus hours for these top tier firms as a CPA. So was that the moment you first decided to start looking into real estate investing, or was there overlap?
There was slightly overlap. Mm-hmm. So I started real estate in 2000, about 2000. I was just, like most folks, we have some interest in real estate, and maybe go buy a rental property, or maybe we flip a house. So I was, working the CPA gig and had a couple houses under my belt. And I will never forget this moment, Jess. It was 2008, and kind of that story of just working all these hours late at night. And I was just like, what are my clients doing that I'm not doing? That they're living this lifestyle, traveling, golfing, doing all the things that I wish I was doing, right. During tax season. So I started reviewing this gentleman's tax return. And lo and behold, he was just crushing it from cash flow. I started analyzing the return and realized that he was buying apartment buildings. I was like, oh my goodness, like this is so cool. So in 2008, I went out and bought a duplex. It had a vacancy, and I filled that vacancy and started making additional cash flows. So I was like, at even a small scale, I could just then start connecting the dots. I was like, oh my gosh, this does work, even at a small scale. So I then taken massive action like most people want to do. They want to move things forward. There's like I was telling you about, not seeing my wife and girls. Like that was my juice. That was my power. That was right. Making me want to move forward. I needed to, learn, and I need to educate to get to the other side of where, to start this journey. So in 2000, later in 2008, I tried to buy a 132 unit deal. So from duplex to buying a 132 unit apartment complex, just, so overwhelming, right? Admittedly, looking back now, I just didn't have the pieces together. I just didn't understand all the various components of how, buying such a large apartment complex and all the inner workings. But that deal didn't work out, and I could have done many things. I could have just tucked my tail and say, okay, I'm just going to keep grinding away here at the CPA job. Although I was really good at it. I just knew deep down, Jess, that there was something else that I needed to pursue. So, in my opinion, there's always challenges. So I had to readjust. So I actually grouped up with someone who had the experience that I was seeking. So education is power here. So there was someone else that was, 4 or 5 steps ahead of me. So I just kind of linked to them and helped them work on a deal, and was able to kind of establish my track record. And then I realized, as the momentum was going here, and now I'm going to fast forward slightly, as back in 2010, with this team, we bought a 270 plus unit deal for $4.5 million. And within about a year's time, Jess, we were able to sell that property for over $12 million. So I was like, wow, that's really cool, right?
Yeah.
So then, fast forward slightly a little bit more. At the end of 2011, I was just like, I got to make some serious changes, and decided at the end of 2011 to quit my CPA job. Just pushed all the chips on the table and said, I'm all in. This is what I want to do, and then to turn in the calendar to 1/1/2012, you either wake up being, unemployed or self-employed, and you got to have that passion and drive to, kind of move things forward. And as I've said already, like the journey forward has been challenging, but such an exciting pathway as I've been able to put these apartment deals together over the years and work with some just amazing investors so that they can share not only in the cash flow, but some of the tax benefits, such as utilizing a self-direct IRA through the CamaPlan that is the custodian to help shelter some of the tax that Uncle Sam's looking to come collect from us. So it's just been real exciting.
Yeah, I bet that's a very cool story, especially the idea that I think, even I myself see, and I'm sure a lot of young investors, younger folks who may be working that 9 to 5 job at the moment now too, or, I think back to when I worked in a theater. I have a theater background, and first job out of college, I was working in a theater in audience services. So my job was to make sure everybody got into the theater to enjoy the show. And this was during my holiday season. This is during this and that. I think you bring up a great point that like the whole Little Mermaid, like part of your world sort of thing, wanting to be part of the other side, seeing people come in for to be entertained and being like, okay, well, what can I do to entertain folks instead of being the one watching others be entertained. So
Right.
I relate to that a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, it's interesting that you were able to, maintain the overlap as much as you did. And I'm wondering too, in terms of your background as a CPA, I think you've touched on this in some of your previous responses too, but how it's affected the way you continue to look at alternative investing or the way that you work with your clients now at Adams Investor Group. And also what, I'm kind of curious about what forensic accounting is and, any of those things, how they've come up or how they've informed your strategies today and the strategies that you share with others.
Yeah, so forensic accounting is kind of a unique thing or a little background that I've been able to now use on some apartment complexes, lo and behold. So I'll give you a quick story using the forensic accounting experience. I analyze numbers and, use spreadsheets and things along those lines. And this quick story is I had an apartment complex where we were making strategic interior exterior upgrades. So we were, let's say turning the unit and putting in better appliances. Mm-hmm. And I always then go check on my properties across the country. And for some reason, this one unit was not being rented at the higher rental rate because I knew we upgraded it. So one of my site visits, I went in and I noted that, wait, these dishwasher and the stove and the refrigerator, that's all old stuff. Like we purposely put new, appliances in this unit. So where I'm coming back to is when I started looking at the numbers of where we should be compared to where, the actuals were, there was just some discrepancies. So I was able to kind of tie in some of my CPA forensic accounting experience to uncover, unfortunately, that the management company was in a fraud. So at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, it was about 25 grand. So that does, saying that number, it does sound like a lot of money. And it was, of course, but it could have been a lot worse, right? Like if I didn't have my eyes on the ball and not as detailed as I am, that number could have been significantly more. Because for me, these numbers kind of, the bells and whistles, ring in my head as I'm analyzing opportunities. So if things don't make sense, I've been able to kind of uncover in that situation. And then on the other side of it is when, my competitors were all looking at, let's say, these apartment deals. And what I'm able to do is look specifically at the numbers, because location, yes, it's important. But if the numbers don't support themselves, we can't pay the investor a return, or there's no cash flow to share. So my approach has been, let me use my background to, uncover value, because the numbers kind of speak to me.
interesting. That is really cool. Um, so when I heard forensic, I knew that there had to be some sort of, detective work on your behalf.
Right. Yeah. I guess you could. Yeah. It's more like detective work. Like, okay, like we're diving into the numbers, and for me, they kind of have, like I said, it's just kind of we have a good relationship, I guess. Numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like it's helped kind of create the sense of, you work with clients and help them in tax minimizing positions, but I'm sure as a CPA also kind of help with some risk mitigation too, and due diligence tips and things like that. So I'm sure that also kind of helps with it too, just looking at it from like an investigator's standpoint.
Yeah. I'll ask this question to you, Jess. Like, so what's the difference between a CPA and a lawyer? Do you
That is
know?
a good question. I mean, I honestly, the more I've heard about CPAs, I honestly don't know the answer myself. So I'd be interested to hear it.
Well, since I am a CPA, the CPA knows he's boring, right? So I'm boring. I thrive on numbers, and for my attorney friends out there, no offense, right? But it's just been such a as I look back again, I've said this a couple of times, but as you kind of look back and you reflect for where things were to where things are now, and what can you do better? My background has definitely served me well in the field that I'm been pursuing here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I would beg to differ. I think you're very interesting. Although
Well, thanks for
my
that.
gut instinct answer was to say drama, probably. So
Right.
that does check. So I want to talk about Adams Investor Group.
Sure.
You've mentioned it a couple of times, Brian, but what does Adams Investor Group do, and who is a typical client? How are they benefiting from the type of real estate investing tips or investments, things like that you guys provide?
Yeah, sure. So Adams Investor Group, I help generate passive cash flow or passive investing opportunities to a group of accredited investors. That accredited definition, or accredited investors by the SEC. So they have to have a certain net worth and income to participate in my opportunities. But so what I go out and do, Jess, is I go find these exciting opportunities. I'll give you one example. I bought this 556 unit deal in Atlanta, Georgia, and both of us are in Pennsylvania here. But why in the heck did I choose to buy out a state? And that we can go in a couple different directions here, but I'll go real high level here. So my real focus at Adams Investor Group is I want to target properties that have a strong are in strong markets such as jobs and economics. Very basic here, but if someone has a job, they can pay their rent. I know we're in a pandemic as this is being recorded, but in the high level, if someone has a job, they can pay your rent. And Atlanta, Georgia, for me, has been a market that has really been thriving from a jobs and economics perspective. So I bought this 556 unit deal for $27.5 million, and then within 14 months later, we sold it for $41 million. So the investors in those types of these types of arrangements, they not only get to share in the cash flow, but they get to share in the exciting journey of the back end profit. So I've had several of these where we buy them at we buy them at a nice price, a discounted price, and we're able to then again force the value by making strategic things happen, and force values by increasing the rents, decreasing the expenses, having better management, and that's what helps force the valuation. So it keeps coming back to these darn numbers. If we can add more money to what's called the net operating income, the bottom line, that helps us force the valuation. And so to kind of sum this up, so my investors who I work with get to, they don't need to go buy their own 556 unit deal or whatever the property is. I partner with a group of investors who want their monies to grow more passively. And again, coming back to the principle of, let's stop working so hard and let our money work harder for us. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So that brings me to one of my other questions I have for you is, do you work with any clients who participate in this type of investing with self-directed IRAs? Because that's one thing we try to educate folks on too, is, those strategies that you can use to better set yourself up for retirement and have that money work harder for you.
Without a doubt. And, working over the many years with CamaPlan, such a pleasure to work with everyone there. So yeah, what a great strategy. Always recommend the SDIRA to folks to, help protect, what Uncle Sam's going to come grab from you.
Right.
There are some great strategies there from, using your IRA to invest in, real estate. And as we all know, probably who the audience is, you can use your self-directed IRA not only to invest in oil or in gold and notes, and but what I do specifically, invest in apartments. So yeah, it's a great strategy to leverage.
That's really interesting. You also brought up something in your previous response to Brian that got me thinking as well. Just you mentioned the types of people that you partner with at Adams Investor Group that you bring on to the investment. I'm curious what types of common characteristics you see in investors that you think makes them successful. And I know we've talked about success earlier. And what are some of the common obstacles that you may have seen investors encounter? What in terms of characteristics also for yourself, the big three-part question in terms
Yeah.
of characteristics for yourself and who you choose to invest and partner with as well. What do you believe are integral characteristics to have in a partner, someone who you believe will not only be successful themselves, but also, help in your success as well when you choose to partner with folks in investments?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the type of arrangements I'm doing, buying these large deals, so my minimum's 100,000 or more, right? I mean, so to develop a level of trust and credibility with someone, and I'm not asking, someone for a $20 investment here, but a significant amount of money,
Right.
and it's not lost on me just the fiduciary responsibility I have, but again, putting that CPA hat back on and working with these high net worth clients over the many years. What I've found over the years is the trust and the credibility. Someone that I've worked with or investors that I work with, there's a mutual respect. There's a level of trust that you're giving someone a big chunk of money here, and you hope that person will not only they're going to deliver what they say they're going to do, right? So,
Right.
my track record, working with investors, it's been repeatable, I guess, from great returns, et cetera. But I think to your point there there's got to be a level of mutual respect and, trust and lots of communication, because as I've learned over the years when working on these, deals and whatnot, is not everything goes as planned. There's an expectation that, we're going to buy this property, and within a period of time, the property is going to be sold, and we're all high-fiving each other, right? But over that time, things pop up. Who would have thought a pandemic would have shown up in 2020,
Right.
or a hurricane, or
Yeah.
maybe an unfortunate event like a fire. Things
Mhm.
like this happen. So investment partners want to know, at least when I'm engaging in a deal, that, hey, Brian, you got me here. Like, if something happens, you're going to be communicating with me, and you're going to help navigate us through the other side of this, choppy waters. So I think, that's what some of my investors have enjoyed working with me is, just communication, numbers, and, my eye focus is, all right, how can we best serve not only the deal, but how can we best serve the investor to, again, maximize cash flow and minimize, the tax liability.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a great partnership between the people and the numbers when it comes to this sort of stuff, and that builds your credibility, Brian. So that's really cool to hear. I think you bring up a really interesting point too, and I know you've talked a bit on some of the early successes or failures that you've had as an investor. But one thing we try to ask all of our guests is there any specific story that comes up, whether it is a failure that you had early on that turned into a major success, or two different stories about one big failure, one big success, something early on that happened that may or may not have informed your investment strategies, or taken may have resulted in you taking a hit that was a major learning experience. I know you talked about early on about uh, the investment that you had taken on the major apartment building, but is there any other story that comes to mind, any major obstacle that strikes you as kind of like a major turning point as an investor?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, sometimes you do need to slow down a little bit. I had this goal to go out and buy these properties because I needed to make some moves to get money's coming in and support my family. So I think one of the mistakes I made early on is not vetting your partner. As I should have done a better job. All the deals ended up being successful, but if a partner says they're going to do something and they don't do it, well, someone's got to do it, right? So
Right.
someone needs to step up. So looking back now, I think it's really important to vet if it's an investment partner, if it's a strategic partner, whoever that partner is. You just want to you want to be careful because reputation can carry over. So that person or individual or whoever doesn't have the same, I guess, ethical standard, or if there's not a good complement of skill set, the partnership might not be successful. So I guess looking back now, I think it's better to be very cautious when working with someone, and ask the appropriate questions, and kind of push back if things don't make sense.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. I think especially for people who may be new to the game, I think of myself and I think of how adverse to conflict I am in life, and being able to kind of understand, being able to understand, okay, this is my money, this is my financial future, and not having the fear of asking those questions, maybe hurting someone's feelings for a brief second or offending them for a brief second. If it means it results in a better partnership, being unafraid to ask those questions and understand what those questions need to be for yourself as an investor. Okay, well, these are my weaknesses, taking some stock of these are my strengths, my weaknesses. What do I need from the other person? Shouldn't be afraid to ask those questions. So I think that's a great point. It struck me, at least, just thinking of myself and how I look at conflict in general. So I think you bring up a great point.
Yeah, and I think you'll learn a lot about someone's character. That if you start asking whatever question, and then if you kind of get that dance, like, oh, they're trying to get out of this. What are they hiding? So I think your point is well taken as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Or that like super defensive, oh, well, that's not what I meant by that. That
Hmm.
sort of thing too is always like, oh, it's a big turn off and just a person I want to be around. So I completely agree. So looking back, you have a lot of experience in real estate accounting, obviously, as well as investing. You've helped your clients better understand their tax and cash positions. So, Brian, what exactly does that mean when you work with your investors? And what would you say are some of the greatest tax strategies that investors should employ? Mainly, newer investors looking out for what they can do to kind of set themselves up to stay fiscally responsible early on. But even just working with your with high net worth clients, like the ones that you work with.
Yeah, sure. So I've set up, I guess, my overall strategy, and I believe that apartments are the most ideal investment. And I know that's kind of, I don't want to be arrogant because, there's so many choices out there, right? You can flip
Right.
houses, you can invest in stocks, you can invest in all kinds of great, choices. But at least what I've learned that apartments, not only can we enjoy cash flow, we can use leverage to our advantage. We go to a bank and we get a mortgage, buy these big properties. We can create equity in a deal and appreciation. But the most important factor that I've kind of penciled or circled, again, put my CPA hat around, is the depreciation. IRS basically mandates us that if we buy an income producing property, IRS basically mandates us that we have to depreciate that. So it's not a cash item; it's a non-cash, deduction that we are able to enjoy. Not on our 1040s, or if you're in a self-directed IRA, that's a different conversation, of course. But there is ways that we can accelerate these tax deductions to minimize our liability on our tax returns. Cost segregation. There's ways that we can take bonus depreciation in certain types of property that we're buying, and it really can really help us, down the road, again, to minimize our overall tax liability using tax depreciation.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. The one question I do have too that you bring up as well is, and I just lost my train of thought, but it'll come right back to me. The question I have for you as well is thinking about, the types of investing that you've done specifically, Brian, is apartment investing. Is there any other? Have you always known that you wanted to do apartment investing, or was there any attempt or dipping your toes into like single family dwellings, or any different kinds of real? I know there's a tons of different types of real estate, like raw land or things like that. Have you
Sure.
looked at any of those things, or even as a CPA too? I'm curious. You mentioned the investment down in Atlanta, Georgia. And I understand that every state has different tax laws or different property laws, all those different things. As a CPA, how have you had to take a new investment that you've wanted to get involved in, or met with a client that's wanted to get involved in, and kind of had to restructure? I know you said you're always educating yourself, which I think is great. How have you kind of had to take those and put your CPA hat on and analyze, all right, well, this is a new property that's down in Georgia, or this is something that my investor wants to get involved in Texas? How do you figure out, what is the proper due diligence on location as well?
Yeah. So with, again, it comes back to the numbers, right? And so what I'm able to do, at least the benefit I believe I'm able to do is with my background, is I'm able to kind of look at this picture and say, okay, here's what I've got, and let me, kind of dissect it, because I'm looking at it with a different lens than maybe some other folks in my space or my competitors. I'm always looking for how can we, maximize our value and at the same time pay the least amount of tax.
Right.
So, although my background is a CPA, in as we're recording this, I no longer practice as a CPA. So, these real deep technical issues, I understand them, but now I farm them out to my, the CPA who prepares the tax return, so that we are maximizing, again, our tax benefits. So when, an investor, has questions, I've got a good CPA myself now to, help me out, because the tax rules always are changing. But I wanted to come back to something that you asked to the lead up to this, Jess, is that, when I decided to quit my job in 2012, I was like, all right, I'm going to go buy an apartment complex.
Right.
Well, that didn't happen. In 2012, that did not happen. So I had to re-strategize. So what I started doing was buying some single family homes, and I was flipping them because I needed cash flow, right? I mean, I needed to figure something out. So, we were doing about 1 to 2 homes a month and making nice, nice chunks of cash. But what that did for me, as I look back now, is, I go to an investor and I say, listen, I'm going to buy a 200 unit apartment complex, and we haven't worked together, and I don't have any experience. And the investor's like, I just don't know, Brian. You sound like you seem like a good guy, but I'm just not sure that I want to invest with you now. I'm like, okay. So what the single family flips did for me is it changed the equation. So, we did this, we bought a house for, let's say, $55,000. We sold it, 6 months later for about $150,000. Investor got their return. I got my return. So I delivered, on that expectation. I delivered, their money back to them. They're like, okay, let's do it again. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is track record, is so important in everyone's investing career. And so the single family model was good for me back then, because it helped me with track record, as well as, I wanted to build up to a bigger I realized I was working so hard trying to find these flip deals
Mhm.
that I wanted to scale up to the bigger properties. But having the background and working experience with some of these investors definitely has paid off. And some of these investors, over the years have continued with me, and they tell their friends and they tell their family members of, these great opportunities. So I always, again, reflect back to, how blessed and grateful I am to the investor relationships I have.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that it also speaks as a testament to what you spoke about earlier in building credibility and trust with your investors, the fact that they'll stay with you and that building that longevity too with your investors as well. I think that that's a really great point that you bring up. So, what are any tools or, I brought up in the last question in terms of, what are you always talk about I'm continuing to educate myself and do whatever I can to help my clients better understand their tax and cash positions. What are some of the tools or resources that you use to keep up with your own knowledge of investing, or is there anything that you swear by in terms of like this is a web publication I always use. Uh, this is this person that I always refer to in their podcast or this and that? Or is there something that's a little bit more like I lean on my network or this and that? So I'm just curious, like what, especially given your background, Brian, what are some of the ways that you keep up with your knowledge of investing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I keep saying these darn numbers, but you need, I think we all need to know what our numbers are. We need to know kind of like maybe that's a budget. Maybe that is, our inflows and outflows. How are we living? And can we be more frugal? And I'm not saying be cheap there, but, can we live beneath our means in a current place and then take those savings and invest that in maybe it's a self-directed IRA with CamaPlan, or maybe it's invested in a index fund, or I believe there's 7 secrets of wealth. And just in my own background working as a CPA and kind of what I've experienced to date is, and I'll rattle them off real quick, is we want to be we want to live beneath our means. I mentioned this one already, but we never want to stop learning, and education is such key. We want to create a plan. We need to know our numbers, but we need to create a plan. Okay, what's next after that? And then one of these, Jess, for me has been success gives clues. So
Mhm.
I was able, as I mentioned, someone else had this big deal in 2010, and they were several steps ahead of me. So there are people in our sphere or circle of influence, as I like to say, that they might be where we want to be. So how do we go find those folks? And maybe it's investing in a real estate deal passively, or maybe it's want to get healthy, so you find someone to go work out with. So I've always found that there's ways to better ourselves by just looking at the people around us, and how can we interact better. And then all in all, I mean, we need to understand our risks. And, once we understand what our level of investor tolerance may be, then we need to take action. And then finally, my seventh secret is what I think anyway, is that we need to acquire assets that, provide passive income. So, if something happens to us with let's say our job,
Mhm.
do we have other types of passive income coming in where I don't need to go, running that hamster wheel? There's other ways that money is coming in. So I think of the 7, I think number 7 to me is the most important. How can I leverage my time or money to again have, multiple streams of passive cash flow coming in?
Yeah, that's a great point. The fact that, passive income, I hear it and it sounds like one thing, but I think you phrase it really well where it's like, what if something happens to our active income, the job that we have been working at? God forbid something should happen. Do you have enough to keep yourself financially afloat? So I think that that's a great point. In terms of, I look at this as at myself as a new investor and younger investors too, and developing that plan. What do you think is a great resource for folks to start potentially looking for themselves too? Maybe it's someone, like me. I come from a theater background. I don't know a ton about investing in general. You had your grandfather growing up too, and you got exposed to that early on. And I'm just wondering too, what do you think are some of the best networks or the best resources for people to start to educate themselves on investing and developing their own plan?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know there's probably some good things out on Google. If you Googled, financial planning, or, maybe not to go off topic here, but maybe that's something Camla should have, like a little resource lounge of, financial planning topics. But I think it really comes down to being real. And what I mean by that is, sometimes if if you're carrying a lot of, let's say, credit card debt, or you're, maybe not financially the place that you want to be, you kind of don't want to focus on it. And I know a lot of people, they don't want to look at their numbers because they're scared to know what they're going to find. So I think it takes a lot of strength to kind of face some of the challenges that financial hardship brings to people, and come and figure out a plan. So I'm not really answering your question specifically, because there's many, I guess, tools out on
Oh yeah,
internet and
so
stuff.
much
But
available.
what I guess I'm trying to dial back to is how does one kind of stand up and say, all right, I've had enough of this, letting someone else dictate where my money's going. I'm going to, kind of take a step forward, and I want to learn about, opening a self-directed IRA with CamaPlan, or I want to learn about investing in apartments, or, I want to open an index fund, let's say with Vanguard. So, we want to start, again, and come back to the education. We want to start, coming up with a plan, and moving some things forward, make a goal, and let's go, right?
Absolutely. I think you definitely answered the question, and just as an investor, knowing your resources and knowing your own strengths, what you're interested in, what you think you can bring to the table, just taking stock of everything that you have available to you and being able to suss out, this is going to be good information for me. This is not, I won't know unless I try, that sort of thing too.
Right. I agree.
Absolutely. So I'm interested too. We are, however many months, because time is just not real anymore, into this pandemic. Have you read anything interesting or watched anything on TV, whether it was for leisure or just, to continue with that, growing your education and focusing on your education? Anything interesting that you've watched or read lately? I'm building like a little book list right now too, from all of our guests too. Anything that you've just found striking about, whether you're, oh wow, this really relates to what I do at Adams Investor Group, or whether it's just like, wow, this is something I need to just start picking up, like as a person and an investor. Any tools or lessons you picked up from anything lately?
Well, with the pandemic, I know I've done my fair share of Netflix and
Oh yeah,
whatever shows, right?
so much consumption. Yep.
Yeah. So, I made a goal to, at least start referring back to my library and reading books. And I'm a big Tony Robbins guy. I've attended, multiple seminars. I actually flew to Fiji to be with Tony and about 100 other business owners to really help dial in, get us, I believe clarity is focus. And once we know kind of what our journey is, or maybe what that why is, our purpose, once we understand what our why, our purpose is, and I keep coming back to, spending time with my wife and my girls, and, getting out of my CPA job. So that was kind of my juice. So to come back to your question, so I've just been spending more time of self-development, reading some of the Tony Robbins books or real estate books, and just really, just kind of working on the business, as things have been shut down a little bit. I took time just to, kind of go through how can I make Adams Investor Group better, and what additional value can I provide to my investors, and hopefully by I'm rolling out a new deal that I'm working on right now, so I'm excited for 2021, and looking forward to working with the investors on this new opportunity and future deals. So it's really just been kind of taking an overall picture of what does Adams Invest Group want to be for its investors, and my most important is let's provide a good value of producing passive cash flow, and how can we minimize the tax liabilities on these real estate deals.
That's awesome. And I think it goes back to your original point too of time as well. I think you've given yourself, it sounds like, the time to focus on how do I better put myself in a better position to make my business better, to better my clients. So I think that that's really interesting. Do you
Yeah.
yeah. Do you happen to have, and I know you honestly just touched on it in the last response to your question, but and I know this is it's a tough question to answer, I think, for a lot of our for a lot of people in general, and just for a lot of our guests. But is there any ways that you like to give back to the community, whether it's your investment community, which you so clearly do just based on your background and expertise, or local community? Is there anything that you found you've been able to provide a benefit to others in your community from your own successes?
Yeah, so I didn't do it this year, but I've done what's called a basket brigade, also kind of a Tony Robbins philosophy around the Thanksgiving time period, is where you gather up local supplies from, let's say, churches or those that donate, and then we put like a turkey in a basket with the fixings, and then we would deliver various meals to those maybe that are less unfortunate. So I did make the decision this past year not to do that because of the pandemic.
Right.
But I think it's always good, helping out our local community, and there was a golf event. I think it was over Memorial Day with I'm a big Broncos fan. I'm a big Peyton Manning fan. So there was a golf event with Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning against Tom Brady, who I don't like as much because the Patriots always beat the Broncos, against Phil Mickelson, and they had a challenge, and they raised a bunch of money, and I felt compelled as well to help out. And I donated money towards that cause, and so I just I feel it's good to give back to our local community, and there's another website called Bigger Pockets. So I have a pretty good following on BP. So from giving back, like folks who have kind of started or in their entry level phase of a real estate business. I get a lot of outreaches to people, or they outreach to me and say, "Hey, Brian, I have a great story about being the CPA, buying a duplex to owning these big deals. Can you give me a hand?" So I get a lot of requests, but I do try to give back to that type of community because I know what kind of challenge I faced, trying to build up a business and getting started. So if I can give, a nugget or two of information to someone to kind of slingshot them forward, I kind of look at that. That's a good way to, kind of help others.
Absolutely. I love that response. I think that that's really cool. It kind of ties into all of your interests, whether it was football early on, and how you've been able to kind of turn those around and give back to the community. I think that that's awesome, Brian. You brought up a really interesting point too in your last response as well. You have a new investment opportunity coming up in 2021. In terms of, this is a special 2021 question, but in terms of, it's a new year after coming off of a really weird year. Not that that much has changed just yet, but in terms of looking at your own, resolutions as an investor or as an investment provider, besides that investment opportunity, is there anything else that you're looking forward to in the coming year, or anything else that you're looking forward to improving or building upon, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think all of us want this pandemic in the rearview mirror as fast as possible. So I think I think we'll all be wanting to dance out in the streets as soon as things kind of get back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess how I look at 2021 in years to come is, again, if we have our plan, we know our numbers, we know how we can navigate maybe some choppy waters ahead. And this new deal that I'm working on, it's almost 1,000 units in Atlanta, Georgia, in a market I know really well. So this is going to be, it's a big mini city. So that's going to be keeping me busy, and my investors, of course, busy as we navigate through, some interesting times ahead. But I always look at, I have my philosophy on, we make our money when we buy the deal. So if we're buying assets at the right price, and we realize our profits when we sell. So if we're able to buy right and sell it at optimum time, we can really force the value and maximize and use leverage to our advantage. So there's some, in my opinion, I think there's some good things ahead. And we just got to cut out the negativity, and let's all kind of work to getting past and this pandemic that is taking a hold of all of our lives, in my opinion.
Absolutely. It sounds like there's a lot of positivity ahead coming your way, and I wish you the best of luck with everything, Brian. It sounds awesome, and I can't wait to see what else you guys come up with. So that's really cool. One thing that we do ask all of our guests is kind of an overarching question. If you can take everything from what we've discussed over the past hour, Brian, what would you say are your keys to building wealth and unlocking your financial freedom? So these keys do not have to be financial, but what is something that's informed the way that, you personally, Brian Adams, look at success and could share with any listener right now who's just looking at this and thinking, oh my God, where do I start? How do I begin? What is going to bring me to success too?
Yeah, I think the biggest, and I may have touched upon it already, but we need to know kind of where we're at now. We need to know our numbers. And then once we know our numbers, we need to create a plan. And the most important thing, or the thing that I think holds even myself up sometimes, Jess, is we need to take action. So, let's say maybe we're learning a new topic of investing or whatever that topic is, and we let too much time go by, and then that whatever gets shelved. So I think once we have our plan, we need to take the steps to move forward. Let's say, all right, I've got this money, I want to roll it into an IRA, or who do I use? Okay, I'm going to contact CamaPlan to, they're going to be my custodian. Okay, once it's at CamaPlan, what am I going to do with it? So then you're then formulating where my money is going to go. So I think just kind of getting, writing down the goals and then taking actions to make those goals become more reality. Because I think we all have high level goals, but if we don't actually take the action plan, those dreams never become reality. So we need to, again, be focused and go get some stuff done, I guess.
Yeah, that is such a great point. I really appreciate you sharing that, Brian. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So, and again, thank you for joining us today. This has been such valuable information that you've had to share, just even from your background. And as it's grown, you have so many insights on your experiences in this industry. And I just really can't wait to share it with all of our listeners. I know I learned a lot, so I'm excited to get to share it.
Well, thank you for having me. And if you don't mind, I would love to give something away to your audience. Would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. The question that we also ask all of our guests before we sign off is basically, how can people reach you? Do you have any websites, social medias, or giveaways to guests that any listeners can use to get in touch with you or learn some more about what Adams Investor Group does?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to at least present your audience with just a free report on why I believe, I've kind of covered the topics already, but why apartments are the ideal investment. I've studied lots of investment strategies out there, and I keep coming back to that. We've got an investment here that not only produces income, gives us tax depreciation. We're able to, have equity and build or have appreciation and use leverage to our advantage. So I'd love to, give a report away. And Jess, if it's okay, could I have that included on your on the website or CamaPlan's website for that free report so your listeners can grab it?
Oh yeah, certainly we can do that.
Perfect, great. And then my website is adamsinvestor.com. adamsinvestorgroup.com. So adamsinvestorgroup.com, and got a bunch of good information on my website. And, if those that wanted to connect more with me, they could, click a form on my website, and then we can, get connected that way on a weekly basis. I send out, education is so important. So I send out on a weekly basis an educational email about apartment investing and how to, kind of put some of these components all together and really, in my opinion, fast forward wealth creation with using investments, or I'm using apartment buildings.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. And everyone, be on the lookout for that, as well as any upcoming CamaPlan events that are featuring Brian Adams and Adams Investor Group. Until then, thank you all for joining us again this week on the road to financial freedom. Tune in next week to hear more from our experts who have paved their roads to financial freedom, or you can call CamaPlan today to learn more about how you can start to take control of your future wealth. So thank you, Brian, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate it.
The views expressed by the speakers of CamaPlan podcast are those of the speakers only and may not reflect those of Cama, its members, or employees. Cama does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by these speakers. Professional advisors should be consulted before implementing any options presented. Cama absolutely does not endorse or recommend any individual or organization, including the speakers. Cama, its members, and employees do not accept liability for losses and/or damages arising from errors or omissions within, reliance upon, or any use of the information provided by the speakers. Individuals are strongly encouraged by Cama to conduct their own due diligence before making any investment choices. Cama does not act as, nor offer the services of, an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. If tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other similar expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought. Thank you all for tuning into our podcast. We truly hope that you're enjoying your ride along the road to financial freedom so far. If you like what you've heard and learned, or if you want to hear more about certain topics that we may have already covered or have yet to cover, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. We would love to hear any feedback from you so that we may continue to make our podcast the best that it can be for you, our listeners. Thanks again, everyone, and remember, tune in next week to The Road to Financial Freedom.